Hey, it's Andrew, and I'm here bringing you another Keyforge deck review. This one is called Tuft Spell Jungle Storyteller, and it's a deck that I opened for a sealed tournament on Sunday. There were 18 people at the event, and I managed to get a 2-2 record and place 9th out of 18. So not fantastic. The deck underperformed a little bit what I thought it was going to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as I reveal it. The houses are Mars, Untamed, and Brobnar, and I'm pretty excited about the house name. It's a cool name. It makes me think of the Jungle Book, of course, and very thematic with Untamed there. Before I get into the deck, one thing I wanted to say is that yesterday at a Chainbound event, I gave the manager of the store, of one of the stores I play at, some event-related feedback. One of them related to something that had happened at the sealed event that I thought match slips would have helped avoid kind of an uncomfortable situation. And we talked about that a little bit. And then also, I shared some ideas about different options for running Chainbound events since I traveled around a little bit and played Chainbound in some other cities. And I talked it over with him kind of early in the night, and by the end of the night he came out and talked to the group and said, hey, I think next week we're going to try something different. It wasn't exactly one of the things that I had experienced in another city, but it was him hearing my experiences there and kind of adapting some of the ideas to the ways this store wants to run things. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're in a community, you're playing Keyforge locally with people, and you think, hey, there's this new experience I'd like to have, or there's something I wish were different, go to the people organizing these events and share your ideas with them. General human communication rules apply. It's helpful if you go in and say, hey, here's an idea I have, or here's something that I feel like I'm missing, and treat the organizer as a partner, someone who you expect to want to help and who you trust, maybe even to have more insight than you. Treat people that way, and usually they'll rise to the occasion. And so I'm really excited about doing things this new way next week, trying it out. I don't know that that'll be every week, but just trying something new out, and I'm really grateful that people in the local community are open to trying new ideas. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this deck. This is Tuft Spell Jungle Storyteller. It's Mars, Untamed, and Brobnar. Starting with Brobnar, we have 1-2 punch, and this is an action that has 1 bonus amber and stuns an enemy creature, but if the creature was already stunned, you destroy it instead. And that's pretty cool. There's some decent stun in Brobnar historically, and this plays off it really nicely. Even just getting the stun is great. Getting to destroy off the stun can be quite nice. Then we have Bramo. It's a 4-power giant knight that has the with 1 armor, and it has the play effect deal 2 damage to each enemy flank creature. That can also be quite nice. Ganger Chieftain is a card we've seen before. It's a 5-power giant, and when its play effect is that you may ready and fight with a neighboring creature. Quite useful. Grok is 5 power, a giant, and has the fight effect your opponent loses 1. And this is kind of like a mirror of Headhunter from Call of the Archons, where Headhunter's fight effect was that you gain 1. This makes your opponent lose 1. And importantly, this triggers, let's say you fight something with elusive, this still triggers even though no damage was dealt. But of course, like other fight effects, Grok does have to survive the fight in order for the effect to trigger. Next we have Into the Fray, and Into the Fray is an action that says for the remainder of the turn, a friendly Brobnar creature gains, fight, ready this creature. Now if you happen to have Grok ready to go and you play Into the Fray, and use it on Grok, and your opponent has a bunch of, let's say, elusive creatures, then you can make them lose, 5 amber that way. And I have played in games where I was able to make an opponent lose, I think, 3 amber, which was quite nice. yeah, so that's kind of a nice combo if you can get them in the right order. Next we have Tremor, and we actually have 3 copies of Tremor. And Tremor stuns a creature and both of its neighbors. That's really nice with the 1-2 punch, because if you Tremor, then you can follow up with the 1-2 punch to destroy a creature. And Tremor is just generally a strong card. 3 I think is actually too much. That's the most I've seen in a deck, and I just feel like it was a little too much. And as you'll see, we won't have any other creatures come out in Brobnar, and I wish there were more creatures in Brobnar in this deck. I think that's probably the weakest thing about this deck, is a lack of creatures in Brobnar. Next we have Grump Buggy, which is an artifact with a bonus amber, and Grump Buggy makes your opponent's keys cost +1 amber for each friendly creature with power 5 or higher, and it makes your keys cost +1 for each enemy creature with power 5 or higher. So your big creatures make your opponent's keys cost more, and their big creatures make your keys cost more. I've been in games where both my opponent and I had one of these out, and that can get pretty crazy. Obviously, in just Brobnar, we don't have a lot of good support for this, but actually, you'll see later on in the deck, there's actually some nice support for this. So Grump Buggy is quite an effective card in this deck. Then we have Screech Bomb, which is an artifact that has Omni Sacrifice to make your opponent lose 2 amber. Never sorry to see that. And then we have a really cool rare, Might Makes Right. This is my first deck I've opened with a Might Makes Right, and it has a bonus amber. It's an action with a bonus amber, and then it says you may sacrifice any number of creatures with total power of 25 or more. If you do, forge a key at no cost. And that can be quite powerful. We'll come back to that idea, but if you get the right board state, this can be quite nice. And then I think lastly in Brobnar we have Signal Fire, which is an artifact with a bonus amber, and it has Omni Sacrifice it, and for the remainder of the turn, friendly Brobnar creatures may fight as though they belong to the active house. And this seems like a strong card to me. The problem with it is in this deck with so few, really only 3 Brobnar creatures, I haven't seen a lot of opportunities where this was where this actually was very useful. Maybe I get 1 fight in. It just isn't as good as it could be. All right, let's talk about Mars now. We have Glixel Proliferator, and this is can be potentially very powerful. It's a 3-power Martian soldier that has the Reap effect. If it's on a flank, you can archive a Mars card from your discard pile. If you have some good Mars cards, this is just fantastic. And I do have some good Mars cards coming up. So this can be quite a powerhouse if it's left on a flank and unharmed. Then we have Mind Warper, which is 2 power with elusive and can exhaust to make an enemy creature capture 1 from its own side. Sort of a slow steal there. Then we have 2 Sky Booster Squadrons. This is a 4-power creature whose Reap effect is that it returns itself to your hand. This is nice if you have effects that care about dealing damage based on Mars cards in your hand. It also means maybe one turn you use it to fight, and the next turn you heal it and play it. You Reap to bring it to your hand and play it back out with no damage. There are some interesting effects that can happen there. The Zyma Think Drone is a 3-power whose Reap effect is you may archive a friendly creature or artifact from play. This is also a decent way to heal up creatures that have gotten some damage on them. It's also nice if you have creatures with strong play effects. So far, the only creatures we've seen that meet that criterion are the Ganger Chieftain and Bramo. Next, we have Zizix Shockworm, which is 3-power with 1 armor, and it says after an enemy creature reaps, stun it. And then we have Combat Pheromones, an artifact with a bonus amber that has an Omni Sacrifice effect ability that lets you use up to 2 other Mars cards this turn. And so if you have a turn where you have this on the board and you leave, let's say the Think Drone and the Mind Warper out or something like that, then you can have a nice little extra boost on that turn. There's nothing amazing to combo with this, but it's still kind of it's a nice strong effect. I mean, in that case, it's worth 3, maybe 4 amber, depending on how things go. Containment Field is an upgrade that you probably want to put on an opponent's card, and it says after this creature is used, destroy it. That's a nice way to make something go away. Most useful on cards that have a strong reap or fight effect. I've put it on cards that have like a constant or at the start of your turn or at the end of your turn effect, like Director of ZYX, things like that. And that doesn't work out so great because those cards the controller can just not use and still be getting benefit out of them. So it's best put on something that your opponent wants to use. Exterminate. Exterminate is an action that says for each friendly Mars creature you control, destroy a non-Mars creature with lower power. That can be quite nice. Importantly, it's not a may, and it doesn't say enemy. So if you have 4 power 10 Mars creatures, and your opponent has 3 creatures, and you have 1 non-Mars creature, and you play this, you would have to kill your opponent's 3 creatures and then also your own. So just a little tricky how that works. I haven't heard any like specific ruling on whether you can choose the way things are paired up in a way that would save someone in certain edge cases. I'd be interested to hear a ruling about that officially, but for now, the way I've been playing it is I say, okay, this creature takes out that creature, this creature takes out that creature, but I'd be open to there being some clarification on that. Flotsam Spike is an action with a bonus amber that says if there are no friendly creatures in play, destroy each creature not on a flank. That is can be some powerful board control, and worst case scenario you get to play it for an amber. Then we have Gromid, and Gromid is an interesting card to play with and around. It's a 10 power beast that makes your opponent lose an amber after Gromid destroys a creature fighting. But it also says you cannot play creatures. So Gromid can sometimes be a discard. If I do play Gromid, then I need to have a plan for how I'm going to deal with the Gromid, how I'm going to get it off the board. The ideal scenario is that I have some way to do multiple fights with it and get that your opponent loses one several times and then have it go away, maybe from fighting. In this deck, there aren't a lot of good options for that except just choosing Mars several turns in a row. So if my opponent has a couple really big creatures, I might be fine with that because I know, okay, I can just choose Mars next time and ram it into it and I'll get rid of it. Otherwise, the Think Drone can be a decent way to deal with it. You can archive your own Gromid. If you have the Combat Pheromones, that's a way to get an extra use out of the Gromid on a non-Mars turn. Containment Field is actually a decent way to use the Gromid. If you put Containment Field on Gromid and then have it fight a creature, you can get that your opponent loses an amber effect and then it'll be destroyed after that. Gromid is also really nice for the Grump Buggy, but also for the Might Makes Right. That's you're 2/5 of the way toward your goal already with the Gromid. So there are some nice ways to deal with it. And one more coming up here, we have Total Recall, which is an action with a bonus amber, and then for each friendly ready creature you gain an amber and you return each friendly creature to your hand. That can be quite a powerful effect, and again that gets Gromid off the board too. And sometimes at that point maybe you decide, okay, now I will discard it, who knows. It's situational, but this is a way to get rid of it off the board. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Untamed. In Untamed, we have Glimmer, which is a 1-power creature. It has alpha, so you have to play it first thing on your step 3 of your turn. And its play effect is you return a card from your discard pile to your hand. And that's pretty powerful. We'll see some other good options for returning with Glimmer, but I've returned Total Recall before. Glixel Proliferator is not bad. I've returned Might Makes Right in the right conditions. Some of the Brahmanar creatures can be good for returning, and then there's some Untamed stuff we'll see as well. They're 2 glimmers, so that's kind of fun. I just think Glimmer's a really fun card, so I like seeing it. Grove Keeper is 3 power, and at the end of your turn, you give each neighboring creature a +1 power counter. This, you have to remember to keep track of it, and that's actually, I think, one of the dangers of playing on, say, the Crucible, is it's easy to start forgetting triggers like that. I've been able to mostly keep up with it, but just keep in mind if you play cards like Grove Keeper, you really need to make sure you stay on top of those triggers. Nox is a 3 power beast, but it gets +3 power for each neighbor it has, so that can potentially be up to 9. Now you're seeing, like, there's some cards here that can be kind of nice with the Might Makes Right. The Grove Keeper is boosting the power of the things sitting next to it. Nox is 9. That's a good portion of the way towards firing Might Makes Right. So we have some good support for Might Makes Right here. Rustnar is not bad for that. We actually have 2 of those. Although usually if I can keep Rustnar on the board, I'm really happy to. So it's a 4 power creature, and when it fights, its fight effect, if it survives the fight, is you destroy an artifact. If that artifact had an amber bonus, you gain that much amber. Important to note here that it says destroy an artifact. It doesn't say may, and it doesn't say enemy. So if your opponent doesn't have an artifact, you're going to have to pick one of your own to destroy. I've actually destroyed my Signal Fire this way before in a game where I just thought, you know, I'm not going to get my Brobnar creatures in a position to be able to use them. So this way I get an amber for it. And I didn't feel bad about that. Save the Pack, I'm not excited to see in here. It's an action that destroys each damaged creature and then gives you a chain. And I just feel like there's so many. This deck actually has 20 creatures total. It has so many creatures. Usually I don't really need this for the board control. Plus it doesn't have a lot of spray damage. So usually if I'm damaging an enemy creature, I'm probably killing it. And yeah, it's just not super effective. Although, you know, it's not terrible. I can imagine situations where it could come in handy. It just doesn't typically seem to be the case. Tantadlin is a 9 power tree that it only does 2 damage when it's fighting, but it still counts for 9 power for Might Makes Right, so that's pretty good. And when it fights, you discard a random card from your opponent's archives. I had an opponent that I was playing last night with this deck that, in just a friendly match, but they had a Zookeeper and they archived several of my creatures. I was able to use the Tantadlin and get one of them back, so that can be pretty nice. Fogbank is an action with a bonus amber that says your opponent cannot use creatures to fight on their next turn. Then we have 2 copies of Panpaka Enga. And Panpaka Enga is 5 power, and it says that creatures to the right of it on the battle line get +2 power. And I've had situations where I had both of these out, and that means that all the creatures to the right of both of them are getting +4 power. Well, that is fantastic for Might Makes Right and for Grump Buggy. It's really good for both of those. So, you know, you can get in some pretty interesting situations. This is why I honestly thought this deck might just run the tournament on Sunday, because I thought, hey, I'm going to have a strong board presence. I'm going to be able to keep control of the board. I'm going to be able to generate some amber, and then I'm going to be able to Might Makes Right for a win. And it just didn't consistently work out that way. For a variety of reasons. One game that I lost, my opponent managed to get some early board control before I could get stuff out, and they were able to reap with the Professor Setterkins for 6 draw, which now some of that was they had a lucky draw up to that point, but they also had a lot of archive effects, so I think they'd really put themselves in a good situation there. And then in another game, it was very close to me pulling off a Might Makes Right victory, but my opponent was able to use kind of a fun combination of lethal distraction and hitting my Panpaka Enga with some tiny little Shadows creatures to kill it and prevent me from getting that MMR victory. Anyway, but I have had it work out sometimes, and when it works out, it's pretty cool and a fun effect. You really feel like you're getting a deal when you sacrifice, you know, in actuality 3 creatures that are collectively worth 15, but because of the 2 Panpaka Engas they count as 25. Maybe you have a Grove Keeper token in there, and it just gets pretty crazy. The last card we have in here is Witch of the Wilds. This is a fantastic card. It's 4 power, and during each turn in which Untamed is not your active house, you may play one Untamed card. That is very strong. I really like having it on the board. Again, with 2 Pampaka that can be a power 8 creature sitting there. And getting to kind of dump those Untamed creatures in a slow trickle can be really powerful. So, yeah, so I think this deck has a lot of potential. It just depends a little bit too much on the order to really be super competitive. And it really struggles from only having 3 Brobnar creatures. I feel like if it had only 1 Tremor instead of 3 and a couple more creatures instead, maybe even another creature instead of the Signal Fire, something like that, you know, it would be very strong. As it is, it's, you know, it did okay. I think it probably could have done a little better, but you know, still leaves a little bit to be desired, and that, you know, I learned something there. So anyway, I hope that maybe even helps you think through how some of these deck combos work. You can look for those cool strengths and combos, but sometimes you also have to look for those weaknesses. Like, I didn't really realize it only had 3 Brobnar creatures until I'd played it and felt like, oh yeah, that didn't go the way I thought it would. So, you know, there's a huge value in just getting out and playing as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. As I mentioned before, if you see needs in your local community or opportunities where you just think there are some things that could be rethought, then don't hesitate to reach out to people and encourage them to try new things. Express what your preferences are, and don't be mad if people don't go with your idea, but you never know when someone will listen and decide to try something new. So I hope you enjoyed it and that you get out and forge some keys. Have a great day.